I understand that a lot of people believe that China and the United States are in competition with each other. That is not true. And the reason why is that China does not have what we call a grand strategy. A grand strategy is just how you perceive geopolitics and how you want to dominate geopolitics. China does not do grand strategy. We are a universe unto ourselves. We don't care what happens outside of this universe. So China has always been an isolationist society for most of its history. Today, yes, I understand for these past few decades, China has become much more globalized, has become much more international, much more cosmopolitan, but this is not part of the Chinese tradition. But in the long term, China will return to its cultural norms and become much more isolationist. So China doesn't really matter in the great scheme of things, okay? The same is true for India as well, right? So I know India and China have a lot of people, but historically they have not really mattered in geopolitics. And that's to do with their cultural values and norms. There are right now 3 major battlefields in the world. Okay? The first, obviously, is Ukraine, where NATO and Russia are fighting each other. Okay? And this is a proxy war between the United States and Russia because the United States controls Europe and NATO. The second major battlefield, of course, is Iran, where right now the United States and Israel is attacking Iran and trying to force it into a surrender. Now, the last battlefield is actually in North America, Cuba. What's been happening is the United States has been embargoing Cuba, trying to blockade it, trying to cause society to collapse. And Russia has been trying to save Cuba, okay? So these are the 3 major battlefronts we're seeing right now. Obviously, what's going to happen is that more battlefronts will break out. As this conflict increases, the conflict between the United States and Russia will increase as well. So one major area of contention is the oceans. Why? Because the United States believes that it controls all trade access. And so what the United States has been doing, it has been seizing Russian shadow fleet tankers. And so what's going to happen is that the Russians will eventually decide to arm its ships, and this will create a war in the oceans, okay? So that's one trend that we will see happening. Another trend that we'll see happening is the rise of Germany and Japan. Historically, the most powerful nation in Europe has been Germany. Historically, the most powerful nation in East Asia has been Japan. The United States defeated both in World War II. But now that the United States is at war with Russia, it needs proxies, it needs allies to counter both the threat of Russia as well as China. What the United States is going to do is it's going to arm Israel to counter Iran, it's going to arm Germany to counter Russia, and it's going to arm Japan to counter China. And what's going to happen now is that you have in this conflict, you have other players emerge that will take advantage of these conflicts to amass more power for themselves. So think about North Korea, because North Korea, it's a military society, and it can threaten South Korea, Japan, and China. Then in Europe, you have Poland. The Middle East, you have Turkey. So these nations are going to try to navigate all this chaos in order to amass more power for themselves. So in other words, what's going to happen is complete chaos in World War III. So now what I'm going to do now is explain to you the grand strategy of the United States, Russia, Iran, and Israel. Because these are only the 4 major players for the first 5 years. Other players will come in later on, but for now, these are the 4 major players. So for each country, I want you to imagine each country as a chess set, okay? And I want to show you how each player behaves using this chess set as a template, as a frame of reference, okay? So the king is the political system. So the first idea to understand is that when you fight a war, you're not trying to defeat the other person's military. That doesn't really get you anywhere. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to put your opponent in check by attacking the political system. The queen is the grand strategy. The grand strategy is, again, how each player perceives geopolitics and how to best dominate geopolitics, okay? And then you have the bishop, the knight, and the rook. And these are the attack vectors, your tools for achieving your grand strategy, right? And now you have the pawn. And the pawn are just that. They are sacrificial tools that you can use in order to advance your grand strategy, okay? You just throw them away. You don't really care. So now let's apply this system to the 4 nation states. The United States, the political system, of course, is a democracy. This is both good and bad. It's good in that it allows for innovation. It allows for debate and creativity, okay? So that's what's good about democracy. What's bad about democracy is the idea of polarization. Because in a democracy, you have different political parties. And they can reach a point where they just refuse to work together. And all they care about is destroying each other, regardless of the consequences for the nation in geopolitics. And this is what's happened in the United States so far, right now, where in America, Trump hates the Democrats much more than he hates the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians, okay? So the way you put America into check is by enhancing the polarization and causing a civil war. You cannot defeat America militarily. It is impossible to do so. The only way to defeat America is if you force it into a civil war that distracts it from the world, okay? Then the grand strategy. The grand strategy is called Greater North America. And the idea of Greater North America is North America by itself, it's a self-sufficient continental fortress. No one can invade it, no one can attack it, and it has all the resources it needs to survive. So all America has to do is unite North America and then cause chaos around the world. All right, so now we go to the attack vectors of America. What are their tools and instruments in order to achieve the grand strategy? Well, the first major tool is digital technology, okay? Meaning that America has GPS satellites, it has precision weapons, it has the best air force in the world, it has aero supremacy, okay? So technology is a very important tool. Then you have propaganda. Propaganda is basically America controls the world's most powerful media systems, okay? And therefore it can control the narrative of the world. Now last is the US dollar. The US dollar is the world's global reserve currency, and therefore America has unlimited financing. All right? So as you can see, America is a very powerful empire. Now we go to the pawns, okay? The sacrificial tools. And so what America can sacrifice in order to achieve its grand strategy are its allies. Right? Now we can understand how America will fight this war in Iran and how it will proceed to fight World War III. Because grand strategy, it's just not only how a nation will go out to dominate the world, but it's also constraint on their behavior. They can only operate within the contours of their grand strategy. So now let's go over to Russia and discuss the Russian system. So the Russian system is an autocracy. And again, there are strengths and weaknesses to any political system. Now, an autocracy, if one man is in charge, that allows for long-term planning, for strategy, okay? But the problem with autocracy is that if this man were to die, you would have a succession crisis. So the American strategy to defeat Russia is not to destroy the country, because you cannot do that. Russia has nuclear weapons. The strategy is to make Putin so unpopular that the elite rise up against Putin and create a succession crisis. All right, the grand strategy for Russia is something called the Third Rome strategy. The idea of a Third Rome is that Russia is the heir to the Roman Empire. Okay, the first Rome is Rome, second Rome is Constantinople, and the third Rome is Moscow. And there shall be no fourth Rome, meaning that once Moscow achieves the third Rome, that's the end of history. And the idea of the third Rome is for Russia to unify all religious traditions together to defeat the Antichrist system, which is Western, liberal, individual, consumer democracy. The attack vectors for Russia are, of course, Orthodox religion, the geography. So Russia encompasses all of Eurasia. And then, of course, you have the artillery. So Russia is basically the world's best land army, and we're seeing that in Ukraine. Okay, and the pawns are soldiers. Russia is not afraid to lose soldiers on the battlefield. Okay, so now let's go over Iran. Iran is a theocracy. And the theocracy is good in that it creates cohesion in society. They are able to survive major calamities because of their faith, okay? So even though Americans and Israelis are destroying a lot of Iranian infrastructure, the Iranian people are still united. But a theocracy is bad because it can lead to extremism. And extremism can divide a population, okay? So it's possible that as this war continues, you have a small minority of the population who become extremists and they alienate everyone else, okay? The grand strategy is Shia exceptionalism. And the idea here is that the Iranians are Shia Muslims. And Shia Muslims believe that only a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad can lead the Muslim world. And the Sunni Muslims, who are the majority in the Muslim world, don't believe that. They believe that anyone who's qualified can become caliph. So for the longest time, the Shia and the Sunnis have been at war with each other. And Saudi Arabia is the center of the Sunni Muslim world, and Iran is the center of the Shia Muslim world. And so what Iran is trying to do is topple Saudi Arabia and become the leader of the entire Muslim world, because that is what their destiny is, okay? The attack vectors for Iran are the terrain, faith, and the proxies, okay? The proxies include the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And the pawns, of course, are the drones and missiles, right? So that is the Iranian situation. So Israel, it is a democracy and a theocracy, okay? And the way you destroy Israel is you cause it to enter a civil war. And it's actually not that hard because right now Israel is a very fractured society. The grand strategy is something called the Greater Israel Project. So the Israelis believe that in the Bible, it says that God promised their ancestor Abraham all of the Middle East, stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. And that's what they must achieve. Okay, so they're fighting this war not to defeat Iran, but to achieve the Greater Israel Project. The attack vectors are the Bible, the Mossad, and the Jewish diaspora. Okay, so Israel doesn't have that many people, 8-9 million people. It's a very small country, but it has three major advantages. The first advantage is the Bible, in that there are many Christians who believe that Israel is what God promised the Jewish people, and therefore the Jewish people have a right to be in Israel and do whatever they want, because that is what God promised them, okay? And so Mossad is the most effective intelligence agency in the world. And what they're very good at doing is infiltration. And they're good at co-opting, bribing, and blackmailing the elites of different nations. And this is especially true in the Middle East, okay? And then you have the diaspora. The Jews are everywhere around the world, and so they become very important recruits for Mossad. But they're also very wealthy, so they can finance Israel and its mission to create the Greater Israel Project. And of course, the pawns are everyone else. So Mossad is very good at infiltrating different nations and creating conflict in those nations in order to benefit Israel.